Snow fell thick and heavy, blanketing the winding mountain road that led to Pine Hollow. Jackson Reed gripped the steering wheel of his old pickup truck, his sharp eyes scanning the thick fog ahead. The engine growled, drowning out the howling wind whipping through snow-covered pines. Beside him, Lily, his 6-year-old daughter, sat curled up in the passenger seat, clutching a worn-out rag doll. She yawned, her big brown eyes glimmering under the dashboard's dim glow. "Daddy, are we there yet?" Lily asked sleepily. "Almost, sweetheart," Jackson replied, his voice deep and steady, though his eyes never left the road. It was nearly 8 p.m., and the snowstorm was only getting worse. He had just completed his last delivery, a shipment of repair equipment to a farm 2 hours outside town. His job as a mechanic in Pine Hollow wasn't just about fixing cars, it was about keeping the entire small community running, especially during the brutal winter. Jackson adjusted the wiper blades, trying to keep the windshield clear. The headlights cut through the swirling snow, creating a white curtain that was nearly impossible to see through. He frowned, a sense of unease creeping in. This road was usually deserted, but tonight it carried an eerie loneliness, as if the entire world had been swallowed by snow. Then through the storm, a figure emerged. Jackson hit the brakes, tires skidding on the icy pavement, jolting Lily upright. "Daddy, what's wrong?" she cried out, her voice trembling. Jackson didn't answer right away. He squinted through the snow, trying to get a better look. In the middle of the road, illuminated by his headlights, stood a woman. She was motionless, her thin shoulders trembling beneath a flimsy white dress, a wedding gown, torn at the hem and stained with slush and dirt. Her bare feet were purple from the cold, her long brown hair soaked and plastered to her pale face. She hugged herself tightly, as if trying to preserve the last of her warmth. "Lily, stay put," Jackson said, his voice firm but laced with concern. He pulled the handbrake and checked the mirrors. No other cars, no signs of life, just this strange woman in the snow. He opened the door, and a blast of frigid air slapped his face. "Stay inside, don't come out," he instructed Lily, then stepped down, his heavy boots sinking into the snow. The wind screamed, flinging snowflakes like needles against his skin. "Hey!" Jackson called out, moving toward the woman. She looked up, her gray-blue eyes wide with panic. "Are you okay? What are you doing out here in this blizzard?" She didn't answer immediately, only stared at him like she was deciding whether to run. But her frozen feet wouldn't budge, and she swayed, nearly collapsing. Jackson rushed forward, reaching out, but she recoiled, eyes full of fear. "I'm not going to hurt you," Jackson said gently, lowering his voice. "You need help. Get in the truck, or you'll freeze to death." The woman trembled, her lips moving soundlessly. Finally, she gave a small nod. Jackson took off his thick wool coat and draped it over her shoulders, then carefully led her toward the truck. He opened the back door and helped her climb in. A faint scent of jasmine and melting snow lingered as she passed. Lily turned around, staring wide-eyed at the woman. "Daddy, who is she?" she whispered, hugging her doll tighter. "I don't know yet, but she needs our help," Jackson replied, shutting the door and returning to the driver's seat. He cranked the heater to full blast, warm air slowly pushing back the cold. "What's your name?" Jackson asked, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. The woman was curled up in his coat, trembling hands wrapped around her knees. "Evelyn," she whispered hoarsely, her voice nearly gone. "Evelyn Hart." "Evelyn," Jackson repeated, keeping his voice calm. "I'm Jackson Reed, and this is my daughter, Lily." What were you doing out there? In a wedding dress?" Evelyn bit her lip, eyes darting away. I ran away," she said, barely audible. "I couldn't marry him." "Him who?" Jackson asked, his voice sharper now, though he kept it gentle. Evelyn hesitated, then murmured, "Leonard Hale." Jackson's hands clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles going white. Leonard Hale, a name that needed no introduction in Pine Hollow. A ruthless land developer, known for buying up the town piece by piece, pressuring locals into selling cheap or facing dirty tactics. Jackson had heard enough about him for closed homes, clear-cut forests, and threats masked by the smile of a successful businessman. "Leonard Hale," Jackson repeated, his voice dropping low. "You were supposed to marry him?" Evelyn nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "I didn't want to, but I had no choice." She paused, took a shuddering breath. Until tonight. Jackson glanced at Lily, who was watching silently, her eyes wide. Lily, can you grab the hot water bottle from Dad's bag and give it to Miss Evelyn? He said. Lily nodded and handed the bottle to Evelyn. Are you okay? She asked softly, concern in her innocent voice. Evelyn gave a faint smile and accepted it. I will be. Thank you, sweetheart. Jackson started the truck, the tires crunching slowly through the snow-covered road. My house isn't far, he told Evelyn. You need warmth, dry clothes, and probably a good meal. After that, you can tell me everything. Evelyn nodded again, but her eyes still held a guarded look, as if she wasn't quite ready to believe she was safe. Jackson didn't blame her. A woman in a torn wedding dress, running through a snowstorm, she was clearly hiding something deeper than what she'd said. As the truck rolled on, its headlights cut through the snowy darkness. But Jackson's mind spun with questions. Who exactly was Evelyn Hart? And how had she ended up entangled with someone like Leonard Hale? He glanced in the mirror and saw her staring out the window, her expression distant, as though searching for something in the endless white. Jackson didn't know it yet, but the decision to stop on that snowy road tonight was about to change his life forever. You're watching Soul Stories, where every story whispers of love, healing, and hope. Let us know which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and be a part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. Jackson's pickup truck came to a stop in front of a wooden house, its warm yellow light flickering faintly through the blinding white of the snowstorm. The wind still howled outside, but inside, the glow from the fireplace and the soft scent of coffee offered a sense of safety. Jackson helped Evelyn over the threshold. Her torn wedding dress left a trail of wet footprints on the wooden floor. Lily, clutching her rag doll, yawned, her eyes heavy with sleep. Lily, why don't you head to bed? Jackson said, ruffling her hair. Grandma will come up and read you a story soon. Lily nodded, casting a curious glance at Evelyn before dragging her feet up the stairs, her doll swinging in her hand. Good night, Miss Evelyn, she murmured, sleepy but sincere. Evelyn smiled, though it still trembled. Good night, sweetheart. When Lily's footsteps faded upstairs, Jackson guided Evelyn to an armchair near the fireplace. Sit here, he said, his voice deep but gentle. Would you like something to eat? I can get you some bread, maybe coffee, or tea if you prefer. Just coffee is fine, Evelyn replied, her voice hoarse as if drained from the long day. She pulled Jackson's wool coat tighter around herself, her eyes drifting over the humble room family photos on the walls, an old bookshelf, and a worn wool rug. Jackson returned with 2 steaming mugs of coffee, setting one in front of her before taking the chair across from her. He didn't speak right away, simply watched her with sharp brown eyes that held no judgment. You don't have to say anything, he said after a while, but it feels like you're carrying something heavy. If you want to talk, I'm here. Evelyn took the mug in her hand, the warmth seeping into her frozen fingers. She stared into the small swirls on the coffee's surface, as if they could help her find the words. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know where to start. Everything that led me to that road tonight, none of it was what I wanted. Jackson nodded, waiting, not pushing. Leonard Hale, Evelyn said, the name slipping from her lips like a curse. He wanted me to be his wife, but not out of love. To him, I was just part of the plan, a perfect wife to stand beside him at parties, during speeches, to help build his perfect political image. He didn't care about me, just what I could do for him. Jackson's brow furrowed, a quiet anger stirring in his chest. He knew Leonard Hale wealthy, ruthless, the kind of man who had already driven many families in the town to ruin with his underhanded land deals. He forced you to marry him? Jackson asked, his voice low but sharp. Evelyn nodded, pain clouding her eyes. Because of my mother, she said. She owns a small shop, souvenirs, and local foods. A few years ago, business declined. She took out loans to keep it running. And Leonard, he bought that debt. He told me if I married him, he'd forgive it. Let her keep the shop and the house. If I didn't, she'd lose everything. She paused, taking a shaky breath. I agreed, thinking it was the only way. I couldn't let my mother end up on the street at her age. But then, I realized he never intended to keep his promise. Jackson leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. What changed your mind? Evelyn stared into the fire, the orange and gold flickering in her eyes. "I saw something I wasn't supposed to," she said, voice dropping to a whisper. "In his office by accident, I found documents, maps, contracts, detailed plans. He's going to destroy a huge part of the town to build some luxury resort. Hundreds of families will be displaced, fields and forests flattened. He even plans to contaminate the water supply to cut costs. I saw a list of officials he's bribed to cover it up." Jackson felt his blood rise. He'd heard whispers about Leonard's ambitions, but this was far worse than he imagined. "Do you have proof?" he asked, tension in his voice. Evelyn nodded slowly. "I took photos of some of the documents. I've hidden them somewhere safe. I was planning to find someone who could stop him. But today, standing at the altar, I just couldn't go through with it. The thought of spending my life with a man like him, I'd rather give up everything." Jackson nodded, his gaze growing firmer. "You did the right thing," he said, "but if Leonard knows you have those files, he won't stop until he finds you." Evelyn gripped her mug tighter, her eyes now lit with a flicker of resolve. "I know," she said, "but I won't let him win. Not just for me, but for everyone in this town." The fire crackled softly, its light dancing on Evelyn's face, casting shadows that highlighted the strength beginning to rise behind her weariness. Jackson watched her and felt a quiet force stirring not just in her, but in himself too. He didn't yet realize that this wasn't just Evelyn's fight. It was also about his town, his people, and a battle he could no longer sit out. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting warm orange light that danced across the wooden walls of the house. Evelyn sat in the armchair, hands wrapped around a now cold cup of tea, her gaze drifting into the flames. The conversation with Jackson about Leonard Hale had drained her, but the silence of the room now brought a rare sense of safety. Jackson stood up and set down his own coffee mug, his expression gentle, though still cautious. "You need rest," he said, his voice deep and steady. "I'll get the guest room ready for you. There's a fold-out bed, it's comfortable. I'll bring some extra blankets." Evelyn nodded, too exhausted to argue. "Thank you, Jackson. I don't know how to thank you enough." "You don't need to," he replied, walking over to a cabinet in the corner. He pulled out a fold-out bed, laid down clean sheets, and placed 2 thick wool blankets on top. "You can sleep here. The curtains are thick, and the fireplace will keep the room warm through the night. If you need anything, just call. My room's right upstairs." Evelyn stood, her legs still shaky after hours of walking through snow. She looked at the simple bed, but to her it felt like a precious refuge. "I'll be okay," she said quietly but sincerely. "You've already done more than enough." Jackson nodded, not wanting to pressure her. "Good night, Evelyn. We'll talk more in the morning." He dimmed the lights, leaving only the soft glow of the fireplace, then headed upstairs, leaving her in the quiet of the room. Evelyn lay down and pulled the blankets up to her chin. The wind still howled outside the window, a cold reminder of what she had left behind the wedding. Leonard and the dangerous documents she was still hiding. But in this house, wrapped in warmth and surrounded by Jackson's kindness, she finally felt like she could close her eyes without fear. The next morning, pale sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft streaks of light across the wooden floor. Evelyn woke to the smell of toast and the sound of quiet laughter from the kitchen. She sat up, her brown hair a tangled mess, realizing she was still wearing the borrowed clothes from Jackson's mother. Her torn wedding dress had been neatly folded and placed on a chair, like a relic of a day she wished to forget. She stood and pulled the curtain aside. The storm had passed, leaving behind a thick blanket of snow covering the landscape, white hills and quiet pines cloaked in mist. Small footsteps echoed from the hallway, and Evelyn turned to see Lily standing at the doorway, holding her rag doll, eyes wide with curiosity. "You're awake," Lily said cheerfully, though still a little shy. "Did you sleep well? Grandma's making toast." Evelyn smiled, a warm feeling blooming in her chest. "I slept well. Thank you, sweetheart. How about you?" Lily shrugged and stepped closer, though she kept a bit of distance. "I dreamed of a snow castle," she said, eyes lighting up, "but it melted when I tried to go inside." Evelyn knelt to be at Lily's eye level. "A snow castle, huh? Maybe I can help you draw one that won't melt. Want to try?" Lily hesitated, her eyes flickering between doubt and excitement. You really know how to draw? She asked, half challenging. I used to teach art to a lot of kids, Evelyn said gently. If you want, I'll show you how to draw a sparkling snow castle with a princess living inside. Lily's eyes lit up. She ran to the corner of the room and pulled out a box of colored pencils and a pad of paper. Okay, but you have to tell a princess story too, she said, setting everything on the table near the fireplace. Evelyn sat on the floor beside Lily and began to sketch soft lines of an icy castle. Once upon a time, there was a princess named Leora, she began, her voice brightening. She lived in a castle made of snow and crystal. But the special thing about her castle, it never melted because it was protected by friendship. Lily listened intently, coloring beside Evelyn, her crayon strokes clumsy but full of enthusiasm. She giggled when Evelyn added a dancing penguin next to the castle. Her initial shyness slowly faded, replaced by curiosity and joy. Dorothy stepped out of the kitchen with a tray of toast and strawberry jam. She smiled when she saw Evelyn and Lily drawing together. You two look like old friends already, she said, placing the tray on the table. Evelyn, I'm Dorothy Jackson's mother. He told me about you. Please eat something, dear. You'll need your strength after yesterday. Evelyn blushed and accepted a slice of toast. Thank you, Dorothy. You're being so kind to me. Dorothy sat in the rocking chair, her eyes sweeping over Evelyn with the quiet wisdom of someone who had seen much. Sweetheart, she said softly, I can tell you're more than just a runaway bride. You carry stories untold, wounds that haven't healed. I won't push you to talk, but when you're ready, I'll be here. Evelyn bit her lip, her gaze drifting to Lily's drawing. Dorothy's words touched something buried deep inside her, the pain over her mother, the years under Leonard's control, the helplessness of watching her beloved town face destruction. Thank you, she whispered. Maybe, someday. Lily looked up, holding her drawing sparkling snow castle and a tiny princess by its side. Miss Evelyn, are you going to stay here for a long time? She asked, her voice full of hope. Evelyn smiled and gently patted Lily's head. I'm not sure yet, but I'm very happy to draw with you. Dorothy watched the two of them, a spark of warmth in her eyes. That little girl, she said, I think you've already brought a bit of light into her life, and maybe into this house too. Outside, snow still drifted softly from the sky, covering everything in a pure white blanket. And inside the little home, Evelyn felt the smallest flicker of hope, not just because she had escaped Leonard, but because she was now surrounded by people willing to hold out a hand. Still, deep down, she knew her battle was far from over. Several days had passed since Evelyn first stepped into Jackson's wooden cottage. The snowstorm had eased, leaving the town buried beneath a thick layer of glistening snow under a pale sun. Inside the house, a warm and familiar rhythm had taken root. Evelyn, now comfortable in Dorothy's oversized sweater and Jackson's old boots, was slowly blending into the quiet life of the small family. She helped Dorothy tidy the kitchen, chop vegetables for dinner, and spent hours playing with Lily, teaching her to draw colorful pictures and reading tales of winter fairies. That morning, Evelyn sat at the dining table, guiding Lily as the little girl carefully tried to write the word snow with a colored pencil. Lily bit her lip in concentration, her pencil dragging slowly across the page. Miss Evelyn, you teach better than my school teacher. Lily grinned up at her. You used to be a teacher, right? Evelyn nodded, her eyes softening with a flicker of sadness. Yes, sweetheart. I used to teach at an elementary school not far from here. I taught kids how to draw, read books, and even grow plants in the garden. Lily's eyes widened, full of curiosity. Why don't you teach anymore? You're so good at it. Evelyn hesitated, her fingers tightening around the pencil she held. Dorothy, kneading dough in the corner of the kitchen, glanced over with a look of quiet empathy. Lily, don't ask too many questions, Dorothy gently chided. Miss Evelyn will tell us when she's ready. But Evelyn smiled, though it was tinged with hesitation. It's okay, Dorothy. She's just curious. She turned back to Lily, her voice lowering. I stopped teaching because someone didn't want me to continue. They wanted me to forget everything I loved. Lily frowned, not fully understanding, but sensing the sadness in Evelyn's tone. That person sounds mean, she said firmly. You should teach again. I love learning with you. Evelyn chuckled softly, brushing Lily's hair. Thank you, sweet girl. Maybe someday I will. Dorothy slid the tray into the oven, wiped her hands on her apron, and joined them at the table. Sweetheart, you clearly love being a teacher, she said, her voice gentle but thoughtful. I see the way you are with Lily, the patience, the care. Not everyone has that. Evelyn nodded, her gaze drifting to the window, where lonely snowflakes still drifted down. I did love it, the kids, the drawings, the mornings when they'd run into class with wild stories. But then Leonard, her voice caught. He wanted me to be someone else. He said an elementary teacher wasn't worthy of being his wife. He pressured the school board, and eventually I was forced to resign. He wanted to erase my past, turn me into something I wasn't. Dorothy shook her head, her eyes flashing with quiet fury. Men like him don't understand the value of simple, meaningful things. They only know how to control. Evelyn nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. He wanted me to forget everything, my friends, my work, even myself. But I couldn't. The children, they were my reason to hold on, even when things got dark. The front door creaked open, cutting through the conversation. Jackson stepped inside, bringing with him a blast of cold air and snowflakes clinging to his coat. He had just returned from his repair shop in town, his boots caked in slushy snow. He shrugged off his coat, hung it on the hook, and looked toward Evelyn and Dorothy. Everything okay? He asked, his eyes lingering on Evelyn a moment longer. All good, Daddy, Lily answered before anyone else, proudly holding up her drawing. Miss Evelyn taught me how to write snow. Jackson smiled, but it quickly faded as he sat down across from Evelyn. I've been asking around town, he said, his voice low and serious. Leonard Hale is searching everywhere for you. He's offering a massive reward, real money for anyone who gives him information. He says you went missing during the snowstorm, but he's not stupid. He suspects you're alive and hiding. Evelyn's chest tightened. She clenched her hands, forcing herself to stay calm. He's not going to stop, is he? She whispered. Jackson shook his head, his gaze firm. He doesn't just want to find you. He wants to silence you. Make sure you can't say anything about what you know. Those documents you mentioned, they're more dangerous than I realized. Evelyn nodded slowly, her eyes sharpening. I have evidence copies of documents outlining his entire plan. He's trying to wipe out the town to build a luxury resort, and he's bribed enough people to make sure no one stops him. If those documents go public, he loses everything. Jackson leaned in, his eyes narrowing. Where are they? In a safe place, Evelyn said, lowering her voice. I didn't bring them with me, but I know exactly where they are. I just need to find someone trustworthy to give them to. Jackson nodded, his mind racing through the possibilities. He knew Leonard Hale was dangerous, but the scale of it and the risk Evelyn was facing was greater than he'd imagined. You're safe here, at least for now, he said, but we need a plan. If he's actively searching, we don't have much time. Lily, still seated at the table, looked up from her drawing. Daddy, Miss Evelyn's staying with us, right? She tells the best stories. Evelyn smiled, though it was tinged with worry. I'll stay for a little while. And yes, I'll tell more stories, promise. Jackson looked at Evelyn, seeing the quiet strength behind her weariness. He realized this wasn't just about protecting Evelyn anymore. It was about the town, the people he knew, and a battle that was coming whether he liked it or not. Outside, snow continued to fall, silently blanketing the world in white, hiding secrets and lurking threats. But inside the little house, a small alliance was forming, ready to face the storm that lay ahead. Snow fell softly outside the wooden house, adding a fresh layer of powder over the quiet hills. Inside the living room, the glow from the fireplace flickered across the wooden walls, creating a warm contrast to the frigid world outside. Evelyn sat in the armchair, hands tightly clasped, her eyes filled with worry after the conversation about Leonard Hale. Jackson stood near the window, arms crossed, staring out at the snow. Dorothy had taken Lily upstairs to bed, leaving the two of them alone in a tense silence. Evelyn, Jackson finally said, his voice low but steady, you can't keep running. If the documents you mentioned are real, we need to bring them to light. Leonard isn't just a threat to you, he's a threat to this whole town. Evelyn shook her head, fear etched in her eyes. Jackson, you don't understand. Leonard isn't someone you can go up against. He has money, power, and he doesn't hesitate to destroy anyone who gets in his way. I don't want to drag you, or Lily, or Dorothy into this. You've already done too much for me. I'll find a way on my own. Jackson turned around, his eyes sharp but not angry. You think you can fight him alone? You've seen what he's capable of. You need help, and I'm not letting you face this alone. Evelyn stood and walked toward the fireplace, as if its flames could burn away the fear constricting her chest. Jackson, you're a good man, but you're just a mechanic. Leonard has an army, lawyers, enforcers, even the police in his pocket. If you get involved, he'll come after you. And Lily. I can't let that happen. Jackson gave a faint smile, one laced with mystery. He walked over to the table and pulled out a chair, sitting across from her. You think I'm just a mechanic, he said, his tone calm. But there are things you don't know about me. Evelyn frowned, sensing something shift in his voice. What do you mean? Jackson took a deep breath, his eyes drifting to an old family photo hanging on the wall, a picture of him, Lily, and a smiling woman with bright eyes. I'm not just a mechanic, he said. Yes, I run the auto shop in town, but that's not everything. I also own most of the real estate around here, the land, homes, even part of the eastern forest. I'm a millionaire, Evelyn, but I chose to live like this because I didn't want anyone to know. Evelyn's eyes widened, stunned into silence. A millionaire? She repeated, her voice trembling. But why would you hide that? Why live like this? Jackson looked down at his rough hands, calloused from years in the shop. My wife, Clara, passed away 3 years ago from cancer. She loved this town, the people, the forests, the snowy days. After she died, I couldn't live the same way. I didn't want the spotlight or the whispers about money and power. I just wanted to raise Lily in peace, the way her mother would have wanted. So I stepped back. I handed everything over to my managers and lived like a regular man. Evelyn shook her head, still trying to grasp what she'd just heard. But why tell me this? Aren't you afraid I'll do something with that secret? Jackson smiled, this time warmly, sincerely. You're not that kind of person, Evelyn. I can see it in how you treat Lily, how you talk about this town. You're fighting for the people who can't fight for themselves. And I want to stand beside you. Evelyn lowered her gaze, guilt and gratitude mixing in her chest. Jackson, I appreciate it, more than you know. But this is dangerous. Leonard doesn't just want me silenced, he wants me gone. If you help me, he'll come after you. He'll come after Lily. I couldn't live with myself if I brought that to your family. Jackson stood, stepping closer to her, his eyes unwavering. Evelyn, I've already lost the most important person in my life once. I won't let that happen again, not to Lily, and not to you. This isn't just your fight, it's mine too. It's about this town and the people I promised to protect. We'll expose him, but we'll do it smart. Evelyn met Jackson's gaze and saw an unshakable determination. She wanted to argue, to beg him to stay out of it, but deep down she knew she needed him. Not just for the evidence, but because she couldn't face this alone. Are you sure? She whispered. Because once we start, there's no turning back. Jackson nodded, eyes locked on hers. I'm sure. We start by keeping you and Lily safe. Then we protect this town. I have connections, people I trust here. We'll find a way to get your evidence to the right hands. Evelyn took a deep breath, as if some heavy weight had just lifted, if only slightly. All right, she said. But we have to be careful. Leonard doesn't play fair. Jackson nodded, his eyes burning with resolve. He won't see it coming. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the roads that led into town. Inside the little house, a plan was taking form, a quiet but determined resistance, ready to face a force that once seemed unstoppable. Jackson looked at Evelyn and saw a strength in her that matched his own. The road ahead would be dangerous, but they would face it together. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the town coated in a glittering layer of frost beneath the moonlight. Inside the wooden cottage, Evelyn spread a set of wrinkled papers across the dining table, the glow of the oil lamp casting flickering shadows over the copies of documents she had taken from Leonard Hale's office. There were several detailed maps, a handwritten list of names, and a faded contract, but it was only a small fraction of a much larger plan. Jackson sat across from her, his brow furrowed as he examined each page. Dorothy had taken Lily upstairs, leaving the house quiet for the two of them to talk. "This is everything you've got?" Jackson asked, his voice low as he pointed to a hand-drawn map of the western town plots. "It shows what he's planning, but it's not enough to convict. We need hard evidence, something that'll stand up in court." Evelyn nodded, worry etched on her face but her eyes unwavering. "I know. These are just fragments. I saw more in his office at Sterling Estate blueprints to sabotage the underground water system, a list of bribed officials, plans to seize family land. If we can get those, we can stop him." Jackson leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Sterling Estate's his fortress? He's got guards, cameras, alarm systems? How did you get in the first time?" Evelyn bit her lip, her fingers brushing the edge of a paper. "I have a friend, Clara Monroe. She's a clerical assistant there. She helped me sneak in before, but I only managed to grab a few documents before Leonard came back. Clara knows that office like the back of her hand. If we can convince her, we can get back in." Jackson nodded slowly, the risks already churning in his mind. "You're sure Clara can be trusted? If she leaks anything, all three of us could be in serious trouble." "Clara hates Leonard," Evelyn said firmly. "She stayed on the job because she needs the money, but she knows exactly what kind of man he is. She'll help." Jackson exhaled, glancing toward the window where darkness wrapped around the town. "All right, but we'll need a plan. If Leonard's away, that's our one shot. Do you know when he's leaving?" Evelyn nodded. "Clara said he's going into the city tomorrow to meet with investors. He's usually gone the whole day. The office will be nearly empty, just a couple of guards." Jackson stood and walked to the bookshelf, pulling out an old map of the town. "Show me exactly where the office is. We need a way in, a way out, and a backup plan." The following night, the sky was pitch black, not a single star in sight. Jackson, Evelyn, and Clara stood in the shadows near Sterling Estate, a sprawling property on the town's outskirts, surrounded by steel fencing and towering pine trees. The main building, a sleek modern structure with giant glass windows, looked like an impenetrable fortress. Clara, a petite woman with tightly pulled blonde hair, checked her watch. "We've got about 2 hours," she whispered. "The guards switch shifts at midnight, and Leonard won't be back before morning." Jackson, dressed in a dark coat and knit cap that obscured half his face, nodded. "You lead the way, Clara. Evelyn, stay close." Evelyn, in dark clothes borrowed from Dorothy, nodded with a pounding heart. She clutched a small backpack containing a flashlight and a USB drive for copying files. Clara led them to a side entrance in the back, where she knew the lock was old and easy to bypass. With a paper clip and a few deft movements, she popped it open, and the three slipped inside. The hallway of Sterling Estate was cold and sterile, the dim fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Clara moved quickly but silently through the rows of empty desks until they reached a heavy wooden door at the end of the hall. "Leonard's office," she whispered, keying in the code to the digital lock. A soft click sounded, and they stepped in. Inside was a spacious office, dominated by a dark mahogany desk and towering file cabinets. A desktop computer sat in the corner, the screen black. Clara pointed to a locked file cabinet. "He keeps the sensitive documents in there. Digital files are on that computer." Jackson nodded, pulling a small tool set from his coat and starting to pick the lock. Evelyn plugged the USB into the computer, her fingers trembling as she typed in the password Clara had overheard on one of Leonard's calls, a long string of numbers. The screen blinked to life, revealing folders with cryptic names. As Jackson rummaged through the cabinet, pulling out a thick file filled with groundwater maps marked in red, Evelyn scanned the files. "Here it is," she whispered, pointing to a folder labeled Project Pinnacle. Inside were records of bribes to local officials and detailed plans for forced land seizures targeting dozens of families. Jackson stuffed the paper documents into the backpack, eyes alert. "Is that everything?" Evelyn nodded, yanking out the USB. "This is all we need. If we get this to the right person, Leonard won't walk away. But just then, a piercing alarm blared through the building, red lights flashing on the ceiling. Clara's face went pale. He installed a new system. We have to go now. Jackson grabbed Evelyn's hand, pulling her toward the door. Clara led the way, sprinting down the hall, but the heavy thud of boots echoed from the stairwell. They bolted for the side exit, racing across the snowy grounds, hearts pounding. A flashlight beam sliced through the dark, nearly catching them as they dove behind a row of pines. "Run," Jackson whispered, and they disappeared into the shadows, carrying with them the evidence that could bring down Leonard Hale's empire. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest, but within it, a flame of hope burned bright. They were one step closer to ending this nightmare. The night sky was pitch black, a faint moonlight filtering through the snow-covered pine branches, casting soft streaks across the frozen forest floor. Inside Jackson's wooden cottage, the air was thick with tension. Evelyn sat at the dining table, clutching the backpack that held the documents and USB drives stolen from Sterling Estate evidence that could take down Leonard Hale. Jackson stood by the window, eyes sharp as he watched the road leading to the house, where shadows seemed to whisper of a danger creeping closer. Dorothy had taken Lily upstairs to bed, but both Jackson and Evelyn knew the calm was only on the surface. "We need to get this to a trustworthy reporter or attorney," Evelyn said, her voice trembling but resolute. "If Leonard knows we have it, he'll do anything to silence us." Jackson nodded, fingers gripping the edge of the curtain. "He already knows you broke in. That alarm last night wasn't random. We have to move before he gets here." Before Evelyn could reply, a harsh sound echoed outside, tires crunching over hard-packed snow. Jackson pulled the curtain aside, narrowing his eyes. Two black SUVs had stopped several hundred feet from the house, their headlights off, but the glint of metal under moonlight guns was unmistakable. "He's found you," Jackson murmured, his voice cold as ice. "Leonard knows you're here." Evelyn's heart clenched. She gripped the backpack tighter. "How? Clara swore she didn't say anything." "It wasn't Clara," Jackson said as he grabbed his coat and flashlight from the wall. "He's got eyes all over this town. Someone could have seen us last night, or he might have been tracking Clara. Grab your bag, we need to go. Now." Evelyn stood, panic rising in her eyes. "Where? If he's already found us here, there's nowhere safe left." Jackson placed both hands on her shoulders, steady and firm. "I know an old hunting cabin in the woods a few miles out. We'll hide there and figure out how to get the evidence out. Come on." They slipped out the back door, dashing across the snow-covered yard, Evelyn's backpack bouncing behind her. The dark forest greeted them with its silence, snow reaching their ankles and their breath rising in white clouds. Jackson led the way, his flashlight beam dancing between the trees as they pushed toward the cabin. The pine forest was still, save for the crunch of snow and the harsh rhythm of their breath. They moved quickly through brush and branches, trying to stay ahead of the growling engines behind them. Headlights began sweeping through the trees, and heavy boots pounded the ground. Voices rang out, low and threatening. "She couldn't have gotten far," one man said. "Hale wants her alive, but she doesn't have to be in one piece." Jackson yanked Evelyn down behind a large boulder and killed the flashlight. "Stay quiet," he whispered. Two armed men in black passed nearby, their flashlights sweeping dangerously close. Evelyn gripped Jackson's hand, her breath shaky and rapid. Suddenly, Jackson's phone buzzed in his pocket, a soft hum, but loud enough in the stillness to jolt them both. He quickly pulled it out and saw Dorothy's name on the screen. He answered in a whisper, "Mom?" But it wasn't Dorothy. Lily's voice came through small, urgent. "Daddy, Miss Evelyn, I heard people outside. They said they found you and are taking you to the old warehouse in the east. Grandma told me to call you right away." Jackson felt ice in his veins. "Lily, listen to me. Stay with Grandma, lock the door, and don't come out. I'm so proud of you. You're so brave." Evelyn looked at Jackson, wide-eyed with horror. "The warehouse? What are they planning to do to us?" "They're trying to herd us into a trap," Jackson said, gripping her hand as the two guards moved farther away. "Thanks to Lily, we know their plan. We're not going east, we head to the cabin west of here." They took off again through the woods, avoiding the road that led toward the warehouse. but the sound of an off-road engine cut across the forest. A beam of light burst through the trees, and an ATV skidded to a stop ahead. 3 men jumped off, guns drawn. "Stop right there, Hart," one of them shouted. "Come with us, or neither of you makes it through the night." Jackson shoved Evelyn behind him, grabbing a thick branch off the ground. "You're not laying a hand on her," he growled, his eyes flashing. He swung the branch and struck one man's arm, knocking the gun into the snow. Evelyn picked up a rock and hurled it at another, making him stumble. Thanks to Lily's call, they had avoided the warehouse ambush. Jackson pulled Evelyn down a snowy slope toward a frozen stream. Ice sprayed as they dashed across it, shouts erupting behind them. A bullet cracked into a nearby tree, and Evelyn let out a scream. "Don't stop!" Jackson yelled, pulling her into the cover of thick brush. They pushed through the dense trees, snow dragging at their feet, but the towering pines shielded them from the searchlights. After a grueling run, they finally reached the hunting cabin, a weathered wooden shack hidden deep in the woods. Jackson shoved the door open and dragged Evelyn inside, bolting it shut behind them. Evelyn collapsed to the floor, still clinging to the backpack, her breath ragged. Tears welled in her eyes as she thought of Lily. "Lily, she saved us," she whispered, voice cracking. "If she hadn't called, we'd have walked right into their trap." Jackson knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "She's the bravest little girl I know," he said, pride thick in his voice. "But we're not safe yet. Leonard won't stop. We have to get this evidence out, and we have to do it fast." In the cold, dark cabin, surrounded by the silent, snow-covered forest, Evelyn felt something powerful stir inside her, not just from the weight of the evidence in her bag, but from the courage of a 6-year-old girl who refused to be afraid. But she knew one thing for certain: the real battle with Leonard Hale had only just begun. You're watching Soul Stories exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment we read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt, original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. The old hunting cabin deep in the pine woods served as a temporary refuge, but the tension inside was heavy and suffocating. Evelyn sat on a wooden chair, clutching the backpack that held the documents and USB drive evidence strong enough to bring down Leonard Hale. Jackson stood by the door, checking the lock, his sharp eyes scanning the darkness beyond the frosted window. The wind howled outside, mixed with the fading hum of retreating engines, but they both knew the danger still lingered. "We've lost them for now," Jackson said, his voice low and cautious. "But Leonard won't stop. We need to get this evidence out before he finds us again." Evelyn nodded, gripping the backpack tightly. "We need someone trustworthy, someone Leonard hasn't bought." Jackson nodded, resolve gleaming in his eyes. "I know someone, Nate, my friend at the auto shop. He grew up here. He knows what Leonard's done to this town. He's connected to an investigative journalist, Marcus Reed. Reed's exposed political corruption before. Nate can get this to him and make sure it reaches the right hands." Evelyn looked at Jackson, her eyes filled with worry but also trust. "Are you sure he'll do it?" "Nate's like a brother to me," Jackson replied firmly. "He won't let us down. I'll give him the bag, and then we go back to protect Lily and my mother." They left the cabin, trekking through the snow-covered woods under cover of darkness. Jackson took the less-traveled paths, carefully avoiding any potential pursuit. When they reached the auto shop on the edge of town, Nate was already waiting by the back door, his expression tense but steady. Jackson handed him the backpack, speaking quickly. "Get this to Reed. Tell him to publish everything: the groundwater maps, the bribe lists, the eviction plans. Move fast, Nate." Nate nodded, slid the bag into his coat, and vanished into the shadows. Jackson turned to Evelyn. "Let's go home. Leonard will know soon. I don't want Lily or my mom alone when that happens." 3 days later, the town sat under a fresh blanket of snow, but tensions simmered beneath its quiet surface. A public meeting regarding Leonard Hale's Pinnacle project was scheduled at the town hall, drawing hundreds of residents eager to hear about the proposed luxury resort development. Snowflakes drifted outside, covering rooftops and roads in soft white, a calm backdrop to the storm inside the hall. Evelyn and Jackson stood in a back corner, blending into the crowd, trying not to draw attention. Nate had confirmed that Marcus Reed received the evidence, and was coordinating with regional police and an independent judge not on Leonard's payroll. But until action was taken, they both held their breath. Leonard Hale stood at the podium in a tailored suit, his confident smile masking ruthless intent. He raised his hand, and the microphone carried his smooth voice across the room. The Pinnacle Project will bring jobs, prosperity, and a brighter future to this town, he declared, earning scattered applause from a few loyal supporters. Today marks the official launch of the first phase. Evelyn squeezed Jackson's hand, her heart pounding. They'll come, right? She whispered, her voice tight with anxiety. Jackson held her hand firmly. They'll come. Nate and Reed know what's at stake. As Leonard signaled for his assistant to bring the contracts to the podium, the doors to the town hall burst open. A team of uniformed police officers entered, led by a tall officer with a stern expression. The crowd fell silent. A murmur rippled through the hall as people sensed something was wrong. Leonard froze, his smile faltering. Leonard Hale, the officer said loudly, his voice echoing through the chamber. You are under arrest for bribery, environmental sabotage, and conspiracy to unlawfully seize private property. We have irrefutable evidence, including documents and data retrieved from your office. The room erupted, angry shouts mixed with cheers and clapping. Leonard's face turned pale, his eyes darting across the room until they landed on Evelyn. You! He roared, charging off the podium toward her. But before he could reach her, one of his security men, tall, dressed in black, pulled a gun from beneath his coat and aimed straight at Evelyn. No! Jackson yelled, lunging forward and shoving Evelyn behind him. The bullet grazed his chest, tearing through his coat and leaving a deep wound. He collapsed to the floor, still clutching Evelyn and dragging her down to shield her from a second shot. Police tackled the armed guard and wrestled him to the ground, cuffing him as Leonard was hauled away, rage burning in his eyes. Jackson! Evelyn cried, falling beside him, her trembling hands pressing against his wound. Blood soaked through her fingers, burning hot on her cold skin. Don't you leave me. You have to hold on. Jackson gave her a weak smile, his voice rough. I'll be okay. You're safe. That's what matters. The crowd gathered around, some calling for an ambulance as sirens wailed outside. Evelyn clutched Jackson tightly, tears spilling down her cheeks. You saved me, she whispered, voice breaking. Again. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the town in pure white. Leonard Hale had been brought down. The Pinnacle Project was dead. But the price of victory weighed heavily on Evelyn's heart. She held Jackson's hand and prayed he would pull through, as the cries for justice echoed through the town hall. 3 months had passed since that chaotic day at the town hall when Leonard Hale was led away in handcuffs as snow fell around him. The town had slowly returned to peace. Forests and streams were now protected. Families no longer feared eviction, and the harsh winter had melted into early spring, with green buds poking through the hills. Jackson's wooden house, now the place Evelyn called home, remained warm with the scent of burning wood and the sound of a child's laughter. Evelyn stood before the mirror in the living room, adjusting her pale blue sweater and simple long skirt. Today was her first official day returning to teach at the town's elementary school. The school board, having learned her story and her role in bringing Leonard down, had unanimously invited her back. Holding her worn leather satchel, Evelyn felt a rush of nerves mixed with joy. Teaching had always been her passion, and now she was getting to live it again. Evelyn, you really look like a school teacher now, Dorothy called from the kitchen, where she was making breakfast pancakes with maple syrup. Her warm smile beamed with pride, as if Evelyn were her own daughter. Evelyn smiled and stepped into the kitchen. Thank you, Dorothy. I'm still a little nervous. It's been a long time since I stood in front of a classroom. Dorothy placed the plate of pancakes on the table, her eyes thoughtful. You'll be wonderful. These children need someone like you, someone who doesn't just teach them letters, but teaches them to be brave. Footsteps sounded on the stairs and Lily came bounding in, her ponytail swinging. Miss Evelyn, I want you to be my teacher, she squealed, jumping into her chair and dragging the pancake plate closer. Evelyn chuckled and sat beside her. I'll be teaching the older kids, sweetie, but I'll visit your class often. I still owe you a story about the Winter Princess. Lily nodded with a mouthful of pancake. Promise. Jackson stepped in through the back door, his jacket dusted with powder from the auto shop. The wound on his chest had healed, leaving only a faint scar beneath his shirt, but he moved more slowly now as though still remembering the cost of that day. He looked at Evelyn, his eyes soft, though he said nothing at first. Ready for your first day? He asked, sitting at the table. Evelyn nodded, her heart skipping a beat as their eyes met. For 3 months, they had lived like a family. Evelyn helped Dorothy cook, taught Lily to draw, and worked with Jackson repairing the fence behind the house, but neither had spoken aloud about the feelings growing quietly between them. There were glances that lingered, hands that brushed, but both remained silent as if afraid to disturb something fragile. I think I'm ready, Evelyn said softly, but I'm still scared. What if the kids don't like me? Jackson smiled, one of those rare smiles that lit up his weathered face. They'll love you, Evelyn, just like Lily does. Lily, still chewing, looked up. I love Miss Evelyn a lot, she declared, then paused thoughtfully. Miss Evelyn, can I call you Mommy Evie? The kitchen fell silent. Evelyn's throat tightened, tears brimming in her eyes. She knelt beside Lily, her voice trembling. Of course you can, sweetheart. I'd be honored to be your Mommy Evie. Lily grinned and threw her arms around Evelyn. Dorothy turned away, discreetly wiping her eyes as she busied herself at the stove. Jackson watched them, his gaze full of something unspoken pride, tenderness, something deeper. He stood and gently patted Evelyn's shoulder. You're going to be great today, he said, and if you ever need a ride or someone to walk you home, I'll be there. Evelyn smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. Thank you, Jackson, for everything. That day, Evelyn stood in front of her new class. 20 eager little faces stared back at her with curiosity and excitement. She told them a story about a brave little penguin, helped them draw snowy hills, and laughed when one boy smudged ink across his cheek. For the first time in years, she felt she truly belonged, not just in the classroom, but in the town, in the wooden house, and in the little family that had become her own. That evening, when she returned home, she found Jackson and Lily in the yard, building a small snow castle despite spring's arrival. Lily ran up to her and hugged her tightly. Mommy Evie, I made you a castle, she shouted. Jackson stood, brushing snow from his hands, and looked at Evelyn. You look happy, he said, voice low. It suits you. Evelyn blushed, her heart thudding. I am happy, she whispered, because of everything we've been through, and because of the people here. They stood there in the snow-dusted yard, saying nothing more, but their eyes spoke volumes. A new future was taking shape, still unspoken, still delicate, but shining like sunlight on the hills beyond. A year had passed since that fateful night when Evelyn Hart stood trembling on a snow-covered road, her wedding dress torn to shreds, and Jackson Reed stopped his truck to save her from the storm. The town had changed since then. Fields were now protected. Families had kept their homes, and the shadow of Leonard Hale was nothing but a memory. Winter had returned, laying a blanket of fresh white snow over the town, but this time it brought warmth and hope. Evelyn stood in the living room of the log cabin, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. She wore a simple white sweater and a pale blue scarf, her brown hair loosely tied with a few soft curls falling over her shoulders. Today marked 1 year since she ran away from Leonard, and Jackson had insisted on taking her somewhere special. Bundle up, he'd said that morning, his eyes twinkling with mystery. I want you to see something. Lily came running in, dressed in a bright red coat and a pom-pom beanie, bobbing with every step. Mommy Evie, let's go! Daddy says there's a surprise, she squealed, tugging at Evelyn's hand. Evelyn smiled, her heart racing with Lily's excitement. All right, sweetheart, let me grab my coat. Dorothy, standing at the kitchen door, gave her a warm smile. Go on, dear, she said. Today is a special day. Jackson was waiting outside, the truck engine already running, his breath forming white clouds in the chilly air. He opened the door for Evelyn and Lily, his eyes gentle and full of meaning as he looked at Evelyn. Ready? He asked. Evelyn nodded, a flutter of nerves stirring inside her. Where are you taking me? To the place where we met, Jackson replied, a faint smile on his lips. Just a short drive. They drove through familiar roads, the snow sparkling under the soft winter sun. When the truck stopped on a narrow mountain road, Evelyn recognized it immediately. This was the place she had stood in the blizzard 1 year ago, where Jackson had stopped and changed her life. The pine trees still stood tall, their branches heavy with snow, but today there was no storm, only peaceful stillness. Jackson led Evelyn and Lily into a small clearing in the woods, where a little table had been set up, covered in a white cloth and decorated with pine branches and tiny candles. Lily ran ahead, giggling. "Daddy, it's so pretty," she clapped. Evelyn turned to Jackson, eyebrows raised in surprise. "Jackson, when did you do all this?" "This is quotation mark." Before she could finish, Jackson dropped to one knee and pulled a small wooden box from his coat. He opened it to reveal a simple silver ring, etched with a tiny snowflake. "Evelyn Hart," he said, his voice low and trembling with emotion. "A year ago, I found you here, in the middle of a snowstorm. I didn't know then that you'd become everything, not just to me, but to Lily, to our family. You brought light back into my life. Will you marry me?" Evelyn felt tears spill from her eyes, her heart skipping a beat. She looked at Jackson, then at Lily, who was bouncing with joy, eyes glowing with hope. "Yes," she whispered, voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Lily squealed with delight and threw her arms around them both. Jackson slipped the ring onto Evelyn's finger, stood up, and wrapped her in his arms. They stood there in the snowy forest, their breath mingling in the cold air, and Evelyn felt as though every pain from the past year had melted away. A week later, the town held a small wedding in the courtyard of the elementary school where Evelyn now taught. Snow drifted gently down, covering wooden benches and twinkling lights strung across the yard. Only family and a few townspeople, those who had once stood against Leonard, were in attendance. Dorothy and Evelyn's mother wore red sweaters, proudly standing next to Nate and Clara, who had played their part in the victory. Evelyn walked out in a simple white dress, not the lavish gown from a year ago, but one she had chosen herself, light and graceful. Lily, as the flower girl, scattered handmade paper petals, beaming as she called, "Mommy Evie." Jackson, in a white shirt and knit jacket, stood waiting, his eyes never leaving her. The ceremony was short but filled with heartfelt vows. "I promise to protect you, love you, and build a home with you," Jackson said, his voice steady and deep. Evelyn, her eyes shining with tears, replied, "I promise to stay by your side with you and Lily, no matter what comes." As they kissed, the small crowd erupted in applause, laughter and cheers rising into the snowy air. Lily rushed over, hugging them both tightly while Dorothy wiped away happy tears. That night after the reception, Evelyn, Jackson, and Lily stood outside the little village school, the place where hope had first begun. Together they lit small candles and placed them on a wooden table in the yard. The flames flickered gently, casting warm golden light on the snow, like tiny stars in the winter night. "This is the beginning of our new life," Evelyn said, holding Jackson and Lily's hands. "For everything we fought for." Jackson kissed her forehead and ruffled Lily's hair. "A family," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Forever." Lily looked up, smiling brightly. "Forever, Mommy Evie." Snow fell softly around them, and the candlelight lit up the corner of the schoolyard like a promise that no matter what storms may come, they would always have each other, and this town would always be home.